Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Ojiako podcast. So this might be a bit of a brief one. I always get tongue-tied and tongue-twisted when I'm doing these shows. So I guess we're into really just basically news and some predictions about the upcoming UFC 259 fight, the main event between Israel Adesanya and Jan Blachowicz. Hopefully I pronounced his Polish name correct. So Khabib has been weighing in and been giving his opinion on Conor McGregor's overall performance and his current situation. He's getting into his trilogy fight with Dustin Poirier. Now he thinks that Conor McGregor's best days are now over. They're well behind him, following his TK loss to Dustin Poirier at UFC 257. So I think this kind of also plays into virtually how everybody else in the MMA community and the combat sports community overall in general, how they've all been reacting, how they've all been responding and just taking in his loss at UFC 257. Just a bit closer. So, fine, I may not like his trash talking, but, Conor McGregor has a long winning streak record, a lot more wins than he does have of losses. And of course there's the other side, the pay-per-views that he brings in for the UFC and for Dana White and for the for the fighting organization. So it just takes one loss, one bad moment to just dent your overall career that looks really good, despite what you may think of the individual at hand in question, because just in the weeks lead, just the days and the weeks after the fight, many people coming out saying that this guy should have done this, should have done that. Just a lot of people just coming out and just not necessarily slacking off Conor McGregor, but it's kind of like there's still plenty of shock as to how he lost that fight, how Dustin Poirier managed to attack him, how he just managed to gradually just pick him apart with the leg kicks to the calf, the calf kicks as they call them. And just gradually managed to get Conor McGregor down onto the canvas floor of the octagon. Because everybody thought that Conor McGregor would go in there and do what Conor McGregor does best. Everybody thought that he would win. I thought he would win. I would have liked Dustin Poirier to win, and Dustin Poirier did win. Congratulations to Poirier. Many people were wrong. A lot of the bookies, a lot of athletes, a lot of veterans in the sport. Many people taken aback after seeing that fight that night. So it was a big surprise. Even I was shocked as well. I naturally assumed that Conor McGregor would win, but no, Dustin Poirier won. But back to Khabib's opinion about Conor McGregor at the moment. Never. There is no way that a man can be at the peak for two times. Again, his English isn't that great, but this is quote unquote what he said. I'm not just talking about him. What I mean is a man can't have two primes. A team could do it. For example, Real Madrid, the football team from Spain, did this a few times in a row. Teams may have this, but we're talking about us as in the fighters. And one man on his own cannot have this peak form twice. And again, as I said earlier, this adds to what a lot of people have been within the mixed martial arts community have been saying about Conor's performance at UFC 257. Just the whole thing, how it went down that night. It's a shock. But I don't think that's I think this is as far as I can see from the news sources coming on YouTube. Which of course, because the mainstream media, they're not really going to cover this sort of in-depth story and in-depth information. You just have to listen to podcasts that are really based on mixed martial arts, like my own and many other bigger podcasts out there. So moving on, TJ Dillashaw is hoping for a title fight, and he wants just an opportunity to go straight for the belt and to reclaim the belt again. Excuse me. Now, quote unquote, this is what he's recently said in a statement. I'm ready to go straight for the belt if that's the opportunity that comes at me, because I know Jan wants it. He's already been vocally talking about it, and I will see and we'll see what happens on March 6th when he fights Sterling. My handwriting seems a bit shoddy there. He's got a tough test ahead of him, but that's the fight he wants. I didn't leave the sport by losing my belt. He knows there's a lot of speculation if he's the real champ because he hasn't beaten the champion to get that belt. So he wants it. As well as that, I'm the biggest draw for him right now to try to fight. That's all very good and all that stuff. But there's this thing of once you've been associated with something bad, just once, even if just once, and in this case it's steroids. He was suspended in 2019 because he tested positive for a banned substance. That was found in his system during one of their tests that he started to carry out randomly. Many people. Well, I say many people, but there is some. There is still lots of arguments, and people are of a double mind as to whether this guy should be allowed to compete again, should be allowed to fight again. So personally, as I was discussing this with Charlie, and Charlie believes that suspension is the best way to go. Because the way that the banned substances thing works is really unfair. There was an MMA fighter that recently, I think this will now be about over a fortnight ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. She tested positive for a banned substance. Actually, I think she knew beforehand that USADA, who had carried out the test, it would find out, would pick up on this. Not pick up, but they would come back with the obvious result being it's that they found something in her system, in her sample, that shouldn't have been there. That's a banned substance. And I think she, it wasn't something that she was taking illegally. It's actually a medication prescribed by her doctor. And I think she kind of knew beforehand. She was a few steps ahead of USADA, and she kind of, I won't say exposed herself because she didn't do anything exactly wrong. She kind of made it known to her fans, to the public, basically to people in the mixed martial arts world. Basically, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to be suspended. So. But that's an example, basically, of, because I'm of the opinion, and I've heard many people say this, that if you are caught with steroids in your system, for something like mixed martial arts, you should be given a lifetime ban. But other people have disagreed, like Charlie that I just mentioned. He has gone along the lines of his suspension, and I can understand in the case of the female fighter that I mentioned, she was a female fighter, or she is the female fighter that was recently made the statement about having a banned substance in her system that she wasn't aware of, because it actually came from some medication that she had to take from her doctor, prescribed by her doctor. In that sort of situation, I can agree, it should be a suspension. But I mean, it's kind of like a grey area, despite the fact that many people naturally will think that what's required is a permanent expulsion from the sport of MMA, at least from an organization such as the UFC. It's a grey area because you don't really, you can find out what substances are in some medication that you have to take, but if there's no other substitute for that medication, it's medication that you need to recover, to recover from an illness, from an injury, to just any sort of ailments you be suffering, which will prevent you from participating and competing in MMA or the sport that you're doing, then I can understand that it's almost unfair if the athlete was to be given a permanent ban, a permanent suspension, and basically be expelled from the sport. So in that case, I can understand. But in cases such as John Jones and the case of TJ Dillashaw, they knew that it was a banned substance, which they knew it was a banned substance in whatever steroid it was they were taking, and it was intentional. They did it intentionally with the intention to cheat. So therefore, in that sort of situation, especially where John Jones is concerned, I would go along the lines, and I still feel so apprehensive and kind of like, is it my place to say this? Even as a mere MMA fan, I think it should be a ban in those sorts of circumstances, because they did it intentionally. They did it knowing that this is going to give them an unfair advantage over their opponent. in the sport, in the cage there. And when it comes to MMA, because of the nature of the sport, this is a a brutal, it can be a brutal sport. It's a serious contact sport. You can potentially kill your opponent, or you can at least, at the most, you could potentially seriously harm them. So in that case, where TJ Dillashaw and John Jones is concerned, especially John Jones, I would have opted for if I were USADA, I would have gone down the road of a permanent suspension. Basically, that's what I would have done. But of course, certain athletes in the sport, especially in the UFC, such as McGregor, John Jones, the other ones I can think of now, most of them are retired. Those guys, I call them the goal, as I said to Charlie in the last session I had with him, kickboxing. Those are Dana White's golden boys. So even when something serious like this happens, I can imagine the organization just gathering around the particular athlete in question and just covering their backs and just making sure that they can stay in the sport, that they can stay in the organization and continue fighting for the company, because they bring in the most pay-per-views, they bring in the most money for the sport, So, and they give the UFC that out of all the other organizations, out of next to Bellator, not Strikeforce, Bellator, ONE FC, and that even BKFC, Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, it gives them that advantage in the case of, they have that star power, because they were the first organization, at least here in this part of the world, the West, the US, the UK, Canada, just in this part of the world, they were the first organizations to really promote the sport, promote and push the sport, promote it into what it is now. And really the sport is still in its infancy. It still has a long way to go, but that that's just my opinion, because I do find it so unfair that someone like John Jones can actually talk and say, okay, despite all the good achievements he's made and the talent that he has, being a really good MMA fighter, still there's a question of the steroid abuse, all these allegations, and there's no smoke without fire, basically. And I'm not going to rant on too much about that, but that's basically what it is. I think I mentioned this in my last podcast, the case of the fighter that was initially, most people would have thought had been cut from the UFC because of the protocol that they had broken back at UFC 257. The guy called the athlete, the MMA fighter known as Othman Azaitar. Now he was supposedly he was cut from the UFC, so most people thought, after he allowed a stranger, an outsider, to break into, or at least to sneak into his hotel room over in Abu Dhabi at Yas Island, and allow the person to the intention was to allow them to gain entry into the venue and see the fight, basically. And this person hadn't been tested. There was no knowledge about the condition, basically, if they were carrying the virus or whether they were ill or not. And it's kind of strange. I mean, wasn't this obvious to Mr. Azaitar at the time? And the reason why they had these protocols in place was to protect himself, his team, and basically all other members of staff who were working for the UFC, and also on behalf of the venue, the people who work for the venue over there in Abu Dhabi where the fight's going to be held. So and surprisingly, this is where me and Charlie actually agree on that. This guy, even though he's been given a second chance by Dana White and the UFC, there's a good chance that he's going to let them down again. There's a good chance that potentially Dana White is going to regret making this decision, because it's silly what the guy did. Why on earth would you let someone into the venue, and the risk it would pose? Because not just the fact that the fights could be cancelled, this is a virus that at the moment, even though there's a vaccine, we're still not so sure how good that vaccine is, how good it is, how safe it is. It's a virus that spreads very easily. It's extremely contagious, and anyone can be a carrier. They can be a carrier, and they're not even showing any of the symptoms: shortness of breath, pain in their chest, loss of smell and taste, and that sort of thing. So he's not necessarily a young man. He's in his like mid or early 30s. So this is someone who really, and I mean really, should have known better. It's a really stupid and dumb thing that he did. But let's see what happens. Now the rematch that was supposedly going to happen between Usman and Masvidal is going to happen. Sources say that the tit for tat and the back and forth that they had on Twitter, whereby Usman suddenly out of nowhere said, "You know what? I'm not feeling joyous anymore. I'm going to give this fight to anyone. As in, I'm going to choose whoever will fight me. It will be my next opponent, basically." So it turns out that It turns out that actually they will be fighting each other. So they say for now, but in this sport, especially in the UFC, lots of crazy things happen. This person gets ill, this person gets in trouble doing one thing, and the fight just doesn't happen, or it gets postponed. One thing or another happens. So basically, the back and forth that they had on Twitter was basically a front to hype up the fight a little bit more, and okay, I'm not sure if it works. Again, we're not sure if it's actually going to happen, but sources are saying that the fight is going to happen. Ignore what they're saying on Twitter. They're just lying to people and trying to hype up the fight. So fingers crossed, let's wait and see what happens. Now, UFC 259, especially the main event between Israel Adesanya and Jan Blachowicz. And bearing in mind, Israel Adesanya has been working in the gym hard to meet, just to bring himself up to the weight division that he needs to be in to compete against Jan Blachowicz for UFC 259. So recently, a particular YouTube channel, sorry, I can't remember their name, but they asked about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other MMA fighters what they thought about UFC 259, the main event, who's going to win out of the two guys. So the first, basically I read out their names: Anthony Smith, Jimmy Rivera, Amir Albazi, Andre Ewell, Chris Daukaus, Devontae Smith, Diego Ferreira, Draco Close, Gabe Green, Gillian Robertson. They were all asked basically, who do you think is going to win? And they were, of course, thinking hard and just thinking about the style of fighting that each fighter has. And each person all said Israel Adesanya. They would all put their money, they all place their bets on Israel Adesanya winning the fight. Even I believe that, even I think that Israel Adesanya could, will win this fight. I think that Israel Adesanya will win this fight. I think, not that I know, believe, but I think he has a much better chance of beating his opponent. I mean, even though he has exercise and just to meet up with the weight division, he still has the agility and athleticism on his side. And even his opponent's close friend, Joanna, God, I can't pronounce his Polish name, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I'm sure most people know, if you're watching or listening to this, a female fighter known as, her first name is Joanna. I think she's Polish. Even she has said that in that fight, her friend Jan has a lot to lose, and that Israel Adesanya does have the upper hand and the advantage. So, but again, let's wait and see. At UFC 257, excuse me, at UFC 257, most people, including myself, thought that Conor McGregor would win that fight, but Dustin Poirier shocked the whole world that night, and he won. So, but whether it's because he got lucky, or maybe it's because he was smart with his fighting, how he attacks Conor McGregor, especially with those calf kicks. It has been said by other veterans in the sports and their podcasts that that's something we potentially will be seeing in the other upcoming fights. And Khabib has played down and rubbish rumors that he that he's going to be fighting GSP. He's not going to be fighting GSP, so he says for now. He says he's always liked GSP as a human being, but the guy's 40 years old, and just out of respect, he should be left alone. But again, in this sport, it seems that anything can happen. So Khabib after UFC 254. 250, yes, I've been getting it. 254, 252. I think it's UFC 254 where he fought Justin Gaethje. Immediately after that fight, said he was retiring. Soon afterwards, there's rumours flying backwards and forwards that no, he's going to be fighting this person or that person. He'll be pulled out of retirement just to fight one last time to bring his 29-0 record up to 30-0. So again, that's something to just wait and see. He's only 32 years old. But again, it's not a straightforward decision that us, in his own culture, it has to be like a family decision, a collective decision. He has to get the approval of his mum. So his coach says, who's Ave Mendes, from the AKA gym in California, he's close to Khabib. He said in an interview that Khabib would have to get the approval of his mum and the family, so it wouldn't be a straightforward decision they would make on his own. It would have to be a collective decision being made by the family. So wait and see what happens there. Now, I'm not sure how relevant this will be to some people, but there was a guy who did call Curtis Blades' phone, somehow got his number, and I saw I think sometimes people are too nice to people who don't deserve it. There was a guy, a UFC fan, that had mocked Curtis Blades. Somehow he managed to get Curtis Blades' number and actually called the guy FaceTime and said, "Oh, you got knocked the fuck out." Started laughing. Laughing at the guy. You got knocked the fuck out, and blah blah blah. Just being disrespectful, basically. Just cut the long story short, and in a nutshell, just being really rude and obnoxious and just really disrespecting Curtis Blades. I think I tried to look up the guy's name on Instagram and Facebook and wherever, but his account had disappeared, so I think he knew that everyone had kind of found out that's what he had done. So it's like probably he's now got into hiding or something like that. So guys, that is it. Wasn't going to really be a long one. I just thought I'd cover the stuff that I come across in the MMA news currently, what's just been going on. There's still lots of things happening, but this is what I thought I could fit into about 20 to 30 minutes. So guys, if you did enjoy this video, if you did enjoy this podcast, this episode, please don't forget to leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy my content. You can also listen on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Player FM, Listen Notes, Podchaser, TuneIn Radio. I'm still trying to get my podcast in many other major platforms. The Apple iTunes podcast, that, from what I can see, actually is something really simple. I've said it for the upteenth time now. I'm sure people are getting sick and tired of hearing it, or getting sick and tired of saying it. So yeah, that's in the works, and it's something really easy. I think by the time I get my next podcast up, by the time I'm recording my next podcast, that would have been done already. So yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, and I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. On Instagram, my name is Ojiako1, just Ojiako1, and on Facebook and Twitter, my name is Ojiako. Thanks, guys.